Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. I used to think inheritance was something that happened to other people. People with grandfathers who owned land. People with parents who kept jewelry in velvet boxes. People with names engraved on buildings or old photographs where everyone looked serious and rich. My family had never been like that. My mother rented every place we ever lived in. My father disappeared when I was 9, came back when I was 14, and disappeared again before I was old enough to ask him anything useful. By the time I was 28, I was working double shifts at a grocery store in northern Pennsylvania, living in a studio apartment with a heater that clicked like it was trying to send Morse code through the walls. That December, I was behind on rent. Not oops, I'll pay it next week behind. I had started opening mail over the trash can because it saved time. So when a lawyer called and told me I had inherited a house from a woman named Eleanor Voss, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I genuinely thought it was a scam. I don't know anyone named Eleanor Voss, I said, wedging my phone between my ear and shoulder while I stacked cans of cranberry sauce onto a holiday display. The man on the other end had a voice so dry it made me picture dust. She was your great-grandmother's sister, he said. Your great-aunt, technically. The property has remained in trust until a living descendant could be located. I paused with one can still in my hand. My mom never mentioned her. That is not unusual, he said. Something about the way he said it made my fingers tighten around the can. Not unusual. Like he had said that sentence before. Like maybe he had said it to other people in my family. My mother died 3 years ago, I said. So I can't exactly ask her. I'm sorry for your loss. His apology was polite but empty. The kind people give when they're already turning a page in a folder. He told me his name was Mr. Greaves. He said the house was in a small town called Bellwether, about 2 hours north of me, close to the state forest. I had never heard of it. He said taxes had been paid through the trust. The title could be transferred to me if I came to his office and signed the papers. I remember leaning against the metal shelf, looking at the cheap garland taped above the aisle. A house. An actual house. Mine. For a few seconds, I let myself imagine it. No more rent notices. No upstairs neighbor stomping around at 2 a.m. No mold along the bathroom window. No landlord pretending he never saw my maintenance requests. Then Mr. Greaves cleared his throat. There is one condition attached to the property, he said. Of course there was. I almost smiled. What condition? The house may only be entered through the front door on Christmas Eve. I waited for him to explain. He didn't. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the screen, like maybe the call had glitched. I'm sorry, I said. What? The front door can only be opened on Christmas Eve. That's not a legal condition. That's a haunted house rule. There was a small silence. Then he said, It is a practical warning, Ms. Voss. Hearing that last name attached to me made me uncomfortable. My mother had gone by Carter after her second marriage, and I had used Carter since high school. Voss felt like a coat that belonged to someone dead. My last name is Carter, I said. Legally, yes, he replied. By blood, no. I didn't know what to say to that. He continued, calm as ever. You may visit the property on December 24th after sunset. The key will be released to you once the documents are signed. Do not attempt to open the door before that date. Do not use another entrance. Do not force a window. Do not enter from the back. I laughed again, but softer this time. It came out wrong. You're serious? Yes. Why? Mr. Greaves breathed through his nose. I could hear paper sliding on his desk. Because the family instructions have always been very clear. That was the first red flag. Not the Christmas Eve part. Not even the weird door rule. It was the word always. Like this wasn't some eccentric note left by one old woman. Like this had been happening for a long time. I should have hung up. I know that now. But I was 28, broke, exhausted, and tired of pretending I wasn't scared every time my checking account dropped below $20. Fear looks different when you're desperate. Sometimes it looks like opportunity. So I went. Mr. Greaves's office sat above a pharmacy in a town with one traffic light and too many antique stores. It smelled like lemon polish and old carpet. He was older than I expected, with thin gray hair combed flat against his head and hands that looked almost translucent. He didn't smile when I walked in. He just stood, nodded once, and said, "Ms. Carter." "Not Voss this time." I noticed. The papers were already arranged on his desk with little yellow tabs where I needed to sign. He explained the property boundaries, the trust, the tax records. Everything sounded real. Boring even. That almost made me relax. Almost. There was one framed photograph behind his desk. An old black and white picture of a large house covered in snow. 3 stories. Tall windows. A steep roof. A front porch wrapped around one side like an arm. I stared at it longer than I meant to. "That's it?" I asked. "Yes. It looks nice." It was well cared for. Was. Mr. Greaves looked at the photograph, then back at me. "By the family." There it was again. The family. Not your family. The family. I signed anyway. Every line. Every page. When I was done, Mr. Greaves opened a drawer and took out a small red envelope. It was sealed with dark wax stamped with a symbol I didn't recognize. A circle with something like a door inside it. "This contains the key," he said. I reached for it. He didn't let go right away. His fingers stayed pinched on the corner. "Ms. Carter," he said quietly, "when you enter the house, do not unwrap anything." I blinked. "What?" "Do not unwrap anything." I looked at him, trying to decide if he was messing with me. He wasn't. His face was pale and still. "Anything like what?" "You'll know." I pulled the envelope from his hand. "Is this some family tradition? Because I'm not really a tradition person." "No," he said. "I don't suppose you are." I should have asked what that meant. Instead, I stood up, tucked the envelope into my coat pocket, and told myself lawyers were just weird. Maybe old money people liked rituals. Maybe my great-aunt was eccentric. Maybe the house had some antique lock system that only worked in freezing weather, and he was dressing it up like folklore because that was easier than saying the place was falling apart. People can talk themselves into anything when they want something badly enough. On Christmas Eve, I drove to Bellwether. I didn't have plans anyway. My friends were busy with family. My mother was gone. My father was probably alive somewhere, though I had stopped caring where. I had eaten instant noodles for lunch and told myself that after I checked out the house, I'd stop at a gas station and buy one of those sad little prepackaged pies. The road to the property narrowed the farther I drove. Houses thinned out. Streetlights disappeared. Snow sat in dirty ridges along the road, glowing faintly in my headlights. At 4:46 p.m., the sky was already turning dark blue. My GPS told me to turn onto Voss Lane. There was no sign. Just a gap in the trees and a mailbox leaning sideways, half buried in snow. I almost missed it. The driveway was long. Too long. Branches scraped the sides of my car like fingernails. I kept leaning forward over the wheel, squinting into the trees, expecting the house to appear after every bend. When it finally did, I hit the brakes. The house stood at the end of the driveway, exactly like the photograph. Tall, white, perfectly still. A layer of snow covered the roof. Warm yellow light glowed behind the front windows. That was impossible. I sat in my car with the engine running, staring at those lit windows. The trust must have kept utilities on, I told myself. That was reasonable. Expensive, but reasonable. Maybe someone came by to maintain the place. Maybe Mr. Greaves had sent someone ahead. Maybe the lights were on timers. My mind reached for explanations like a hand searching for a railing in the dark. Then I noticed the wreath on the front door. Fresh pine. Red ribbon. Not faded. Not dusty. Fresh. I took the envelope from my pocket. The wax seal was already cracked. I know I hadn't opened it. I would have remembered. Inside was a brass key tied with a red thread. There was also a folded note, written in neat handwriting. "Welcome home, Clara. My name is Clara." I had not told Mr. Greaves that. The legal documents said Claire Carter because that's what my ID says. Everyone at work called me Claire. My mother was the only person who ever called me Clara, usually when she was tired or sad or looking at me like I reminded her of someone she didn't want to remember. I sat there for a long time, long enough for the windshield to fog at the edges. I should have started the car and backed out. I know that. I have replayed that moment so many times that it feels worn smooth in my head. A little scene I can't change. Me in the driver's seat. The warm windows. The key in my hand. The note with my real name on it. But all I could think was, if this was mine, I needed to know. So I got out. The cold hit my face hard enough to make my eyes water. Snow crunched under my boots as I walked up the porch steps. The boards didn't creak. Not once. For a house that old, everything felt too solid, too ready. I put the key into the lock. Before I turned it, something moved behind the door. Not footsteps. Not exactly. More like the house exhaled. A soft shift of air. Warmth seeped through the crack under the door, carrying the smell of cinnamon, pine, and wood smoke. My hand froze on the key. Then the lock turned by itself. Click. The door opened inward. Just an inch. I stood there, heart thudding, every part of me telling myself to leave while my hand pushed the door the rest of the way. Inside, the house looked like Christmas had been waiting for me. There was a tree in the foyer, taller than any tree I had ever had as a kid, decorated with glass ornaments and strings of popcorn. Candles flickered in brass holders along the walls, though none of the flames seemed to move. A fire burned in a stone fireplace at the end of a sitting room to the left. The air was warm. Not dusty. Not stale. Warm. Like someone had just stepped into the next room. "Hello," I called. My voice sounded small. The house swallowed it. I stepped inside and wiped my boots on the mat because some dumb, automatic part of my brain still cared about being polite. The door shut behind me. Not slammed. Just closed. A soft, final sound. I turned immediately and tried the handle. It opened. I laughed under my breath, embarrassed by how fast panic had risen in me. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. It's just a house." I kept the door open behind me while I walked farther in. The foyer had family portraits covering the walls. Men in stiff collars. Women in black dresses. Children with serious eyes. The frames were polished. No dust anywhere. At first, I thought I was imagining the resemblance. Then I saw my mother. Not a portrait of her exactly. A photograph. She was maybe 12, standing on the front porch in a red coat. Her hair was in 2 uneven braids. She looked furious, like someone had forced her to stand there. I moved closer. My throat tightened. Beside her stood a woman I didn't recognize, tall and thin, one hand resting on my mother's shoulder. Her fingers looked too tight. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, someone had written, "Margaret returned. 1982. Returned. Not visited. Returned." I put the photo down. The sitting room was worse. Not because it was ugly. It was beautiful. That was what made it wrong. A fire crackled. Stockings hung from the mantel. A record player in the corner spun quietly, playing some old Christmas song with a choir that sounded very far away. On a side table sat a tray with 1 cup of tea. Steam rose from it. I stared at that cup. Then I said, louder this time, "Is someone here?" No answer. The walls gave a faint tick as the heat moved through them. I told myself to check the kitchen, take photos, and leave. That was the plan. Document the condition of the house. Call a realtor after the holidays. Sell it. Pay off my debts. Start over. Simple. The kitchen looked like a magazine spread from another century. Copper pans hung above a black stove. A bowl of oranges sat on the counter. Fresh bread rested under a cloth. I didn't touch anything. I had started to understand that touching things mattered here. That was when I noticed the presents. They were in the parlor behind the tree, dozens of them, arranged carefully beneath the lowest branches. All wrapped in brown paper, tied with red string. Each one had a tag. I crouched before I could stop myself. The first tag said, "For Margaret," my mother's name. My fingers went cold. I picked up another. For Thomas, my grandfather. Another. For Ruth, my grandmother. Another. For Daniel, my uncle, who died before I was born. I moved from package to package, reading names I knew from funeral cards, old family stories, half-remembered arguments my mother had with relatives over the phone. Every name belonged to someone dead. Some had dates beneath them. Margaret, opened 2003. My mother died in 2023. I stared at the tag, confused. Then I saw the package underneath it. For Margaret, unopened. My stomach turned. I stood so fast my knee hit the coffee table. A glass ornament on the tree trembled. Somewhere inside the wall, something tapped back. Once, then twice, like a polite knock. I stopped breathing. The sound came from the wall behind the fireplace. Tap, tap, tap. I backed away. Hello, I said again, but this time it came out thin and stupid. The tapping stopped. For a few seconds, the only sound was the record player. Then a voice spoke from inside the wall. Clara? It sounded like my mother. Not a perfect imitation. Not exactly. It had her tired softness. The little rasp she had when she woke up from a nap. The way she said my name like she was afraid I might disappear if she said it too loudly. I went completely still. Mom. The second I said it, I hated myself. The wall gave a low creak. Baby, the voice whispered. You came. My eyes filled instantly. Grief is humiliating like that. It does not care if you are scared. It does not care if you know better. It hears the voice of someone you loved, and it drops you to your knees. No, I said, shaking my head. No, that's not real. The voice sighed. The exact way she used to sigh when bills came in the mail. You're cold, it said. Open your gift. I looked at the presents. No. Open it, Clara. I backed toward the foyer. My boot hit something. A gift. It hadn't been there before. Small. Rectangular. Wrapped in red paper instead of brown. The tag faced up. For Clara. I didn't move. The house seemed to get quieter around me. Even the fire softened. Even the record player clicked into silence. For a long moment, I just stared at my name. Then the wall behind me knocked. Hard. I flinched and turned. Another knock came from the ceiling. Then from the hallway. Then from beneath the floor. Not loud enough to be dramatic. That made it worse. It sounded patient. Like fingers testing wood. Like something old remembering where all the rooms were. I ran to the front door. The handle turned under my hand, but the door wouldn't open. I yanked harder. Nothing. Come on, I whispered. Come on, come on. Behind me, my mother's voice said, You know how rude it is to leave before midnight. I spun around. The foyer was empty. The tree lights blinked softly. Who's here? I shouted. My voice cracked on the last word. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Then another. Slow. Measured. Someone was walking above me. I grabbed my phone. No service. Of course. I opened the camera anyway, because some ridiculous part of me thought evidence would make this real in a way I could handle. I took a photo of the foyer, the presents, the door. The screen glitched. For 1 second, the camera showed the room differently. The tree was dead. The wallpaper peeled. The candles were black stubs. And behind me, reflected in the glass of a picture frame, stood a tall woman in a dark dress with one hand raised near my shoulder. I screamed and dropped the phone. When I looked back, there was no one there. The phone lay face up on the rug. The photo it had taken was normal. Warm room. Pretty tree. No woman. I picked it up with shaking hands. That was when I saw the time. 11:41 p.m. Impossible. I had arrived before 5. I had been inside for maybe 20 minutes. The clock on the mantel chimed once. Not 11 times. Once. Like a warning. I forced myself to think. Front door locked. No service. Do not use another entrance, Mr. Greaves had said. Do not force a window. Do not enter from the back. He had never said anything about leaving through the back. The kitchen had a side door. I remembered seeing it beside the pantry. I moved quietly. I don't know why. The house already knew where I was. but fear makes you behave like prey. Every step felt too loud. The hallway seemed longer than before. The portraits watched me from their frames, eyes dark and glossy in the candlelight. When I reached the kitchen, the bread on the counter had been sliced. One piece sat on a plate. Beside it was my mother's old mug. Blue ceramic, chipped near the handle. My mug now. The one I kept on the second shelf in my apartment. The one I had used that morning for instant coffee. I stared at it, unable to understand how it could be there. Steam curled from inside. On the table lay a folded napkin. Written across it in my mother's handwriting were 5 words. Don't make it chase you. My mouth went dry. Something shifted in the pantry. A slow scrape, like a shoulder brushing wood. I turned toward the side door and ran. My hand closed around the knob. For half a second it turned. Cold air touched my fingers. Then something on the other side pushed back. Hard. The door slammed shut. I stumbled away from it. The pantry door opened behind me. Not all the way. Just enough to show darkness. A smell drifted out. Damp wood. Old fabric. Earth. Then came my uncle's voice. I had never heard his voice in real life, but somehow I knew. Don't be difficult, it said. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. 1 second I was in the kitchen. The next I was tearing through the hallway, knocking into a table, sending a vase crashing to the floor. It shattered. Every portrait on the wall turned crooked at once. The house groaned. Not like old wood. Like annoyance. I grabbed the banister and nearly slipped as I reached the stairs. I don't know why I went up. Panic doesn't draw maps. It just picks a direction away from the thing behind you. The second-floor hallway was dim, lit by small lamps with yellow shades. Doors lined both sides. Each one had a brass nameplate. Ruth. Thomas. Daniel. Margaret. At the end of the hall was one door without a name. It stood open. Inside was a bedroom. My bedroom. Not from my apartment. From when I was little. The pink quilt. The glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. The stuffed rabbit with one missing eye. Even the sticker-covered dresser my mother sold at a yard sale when I was 10. I stepped inside before I could stop myself. The room smelled like baby shampoo and dust. On the bed sat a wrapped present. Red paper. Red string. For Clara. I backed out immediately. The hallway behind me was gone. Not dark. Gone. There was only a wall where the hall had been, covered in the same flowered wallpaper as the bedroom. I pressed both hands against it. Solid. No, I said. No, no, no. The ceiling stars above me glowed faintly. The stuffed rabbit tipped over on the bed. From somewhere inside the room, my mother's voice whispered, "You were supposed to come when I called." I turned slowly. The closet door was open. Inside hung my mother's red coat, the one from the photograph. Something stood behind it, not fully visible, just the suggestion of a face between the hanging fabric. Pale skin, dark eyes, a mouth too still. I couldn't scream. My body locked. The thing behind the coat raised one finger and pointed at the present. Open it. I shook my head. The room seemed to shrink. The walls moved inward by inches, slow enough that I wasn't sure at first. Then the dresser scraped against the floor. The bed frame groaned. I grabbed the present because I panicked, not because I wanted to. The second my hands touched it, the room stopped moving. The paper was warm. Something inside shifted. Not like an object, like something small adjusting itself. I dropped it. The thing in the closet hissed, and the sound wasn't my mother anymore. The wall behind me cracked open. A narrow seam appeared where no door had been. I threw myself through it. I hit the hallway floor hard, shoulder first. Pain shot down my arm. I scrambled up, slipping on the rug, and ran for the stairs. Behind me, doors opened one by one. Ruth. Thomas. Daniel. Margaret. Voices spilled out. Some pleading. Some angry. Some laughing softly. Clara. Stay. It's your turn. You don't have anywhere else. You never did. I reached the stairs and flew down them, barely touching the steps. At the bottom, the tree lights were blazing bright enough to hurt my eyes. The front door stood open. Outside, snow swirled in the dark, I almost sobbed with relief. Then I saw Mr. Greaves standing on the porch. He wore the same gray coat from his office, hands folded neatly in front of him. Snow collected on his shoulders and hair. He looked like he had been standing there for hours. I stopped dead. He looked past me into the house. "Did you open it?" he asked. I couldn't speak. He stepped closer, peering at my empty hands. "Did you open your gift?" "No." His face changed. "Not much. Just a tightening around the mouth." "You shouldn't have touched it." Something slammed upstairs. The chandelier above us trembled. I grabbed the open door and tried to push past him. He caught my arm. His fingers were cold and surprisingly strong. "Listen to me," he said. For the first time, his voice shook. "At midnight, it chooses whether to keep you. If you touch the gift, it has your scent." I tried to pull away. "What is this place?" Mr. Greaves's eyes flicked toward the staircase. "A house." "That is not a house." "No," he said softly. "Not anymore." Another slam upstairs. Closer this time. He released my arm and stepped aside. "Run to your car. Do not look back until you reach the road." I didn't wait. I ran. Down the porch steps. Across the snow. My boots slipped. Branches clawed at my coat. The cold burned my lungs. Behind me, the house began to ring with voices. Not screams. Invitations. My mother calling my name. My grandmother humming. A child laughing. A man sobbing. All of them layered together until it sounded like the walls themselves were speaking. I reached my car and yanked the door open. The key slipped from my hand. I dropped to my knees in the snow, feeling blindly under the seat, crying so hard I could barely see. "Please," I whispered. "Please, please." My fingers closed around the key. I shoved it into the ignition. The engine turned once. Then again. Nothing. Through the windshield, I saw the front door of the house. Open. Dark. Waiting. The clock inside began to chime. 1, 2, 3. I turned the key again. 4, 5. The engine coughed. 6, 7. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I looked down. 1 bar of service. A text from an unknown number. "Open it, Clara." 8, 9. I screamed and turned the key one last time. The engine roared. 10. I threw the car into reverse. 11. The front porch light went out. 12. Something hit the back window. Not breaking it, just pressing against it. A handprint bloomed in the frost. Small. Female. My mother's wedding ring marked clearly in the ice. I slammed the gas. The car shot backward down the driveway, fishtailing so badly I almost went into the trees. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I hit the main road and kept driving until the house was miles behind me and my hands were too numb to grip the wheel properly. At a gas station outside Bellwether, I pulled in and threw up beside the air pump. The cashier called the police because I came inside shaking, bleeding from my shoulder, asking if I could use the phone. 2 officers drove me back near the property. Near it, not to it. Voss Lane wasn't there. I stood on the shoulder of the road while their flashlights moved across trees and snow and empty ditch. There was a driveway, I kept saying. There was a mailbox. It was right here. 1 officer tried to be gentle. The other looked annoyed. They thought I was drunk or high or having a breakdown. I don't blame them. There was no house, no driveway, no mailbox. The next day, I called Mr. Greaves's office. The number was disconnected. I drove back to the town with the pharmacy. There was no law office upstairs. The pharmacist told me the 2nd floor had been empty for 15 years. When I described Mr. Greaves, her face went pale. She said that sounded like Edmund Greaves, a lawyer who used to handle estate transfers in the area. He died in 1998. I sold my car 2 weeks later because I couldn't stand seeing the handprint on the back window. It didn't wash off. Not with soap. Not with vinegar. Not even when I paid a detailer who promised me he could get anything out of glass. It faded only when Christmas passed. I moved out of my apartment in March. New city. New job. New number. For a while, I convinced myself I was fine. I told myself grief had twisted something in me, that maybe I had gone to the house, maybe I had seen old decorations, maybe I had panicked and filled in the rest. I wanted that to be true so badly that I almost believed it. Then last week, a red envelope arrived at my new apartment. No stamp, no return address, just my name written across the front. Clara Voss. Inside was the brass key, and a small gift tag, red string still attached. For Clara, unopened. I burned the envelope in the kitchen sink. I threw the key into the river. I didn't sleep that night. This morning, I found pine needles outside my front door. Fresh ones, green, arranged in a perfect circle. And when I stepped over them to leave for work, I heard something inside my apartment wall knock gently. Once, then twice, then 3 times. Like it was being polite. Like it had finally found me. Story 2. A few weeks before Christmas, I got a job I didn't really want. It was at a dying mall on the edge of town. The kind of place that still had decorations from 3 Christmases ago because nobody bothered to take them down. Half the stores were empty, and the escalator made a grinding sound like it was slowly giving up on life. I needed the money, though. I was 19, saving up for community college, and my mom had made it very clear that rent didn't care about dreams. The job was simple: help run the Santa photo booth. Dress kids up, sit them on Santa's lap, take pictures, smile, repeat. They told me it was holiday fun. It was mostly fluorescent lights and screaming toddlers. Santa's helper on paper, mall photographer in reality. The first time I met Santa, I expected a guy in a cheap costume who smelled like coffee and regret. Instead, he was already there when I arrived. Full suit, real beard, not fake, not glued on, real enough that it made me hesitate for half a second. He was sitting alone in the booth, adjusting his gloves. When he saw me, he smiled like we'd met before. "You're the new one," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I replied. "Jake." He nodded slowly. "Good. You look like you'll last longer than the last boy." That was the first red flag. I laughed it off, but something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. "What happened to him?" I asked. Santa shrugged. He forgot what he was doing here. Before I could ask what that meant, a mall manager called my name and shoved a camera into my hands like I was already late. The booth was small. Red curtains, plastic snowflakes taped to the frame, a fake fireplace display that flickered too slowly. Santa sat on his chair like it belonged to him in a way that didn't feel theatrical. The first few hours were normal. Kids crying, parents forcing smiles, flash, print, repeat. Santa was good with them, though. Too good. He leaned in close, asked their names like he already knew them, laughed softly at things they didn't say out loud. At first, I thought he was just one of those naturally creepy old men who somehow worked in seasonal jobs every year without anyone questioning it. Then I noticed something small. He didn't ask kids what they wanted for Christmas. He told them what they already had. "Oh," I heard him say to a little girl with pigtails, "you still sleep with the blue rabbit under your pillow. I thought you would have outgrown that by now." The girl froze. Her mother laughed awkwardly. "She doesn't." But the girl nodded, slowly, like she wasn't sure how he knew. Santa just smiled and said, "Good. It helps you sleep." I leaned toward him after they left. "Do you know them?" I asked quietly. He didn't look at me. "I know what they carry," he said. That wasn't an answer. I should have stopped there. I didn't. The next strange thing happened around noon. A boy about 6 years old climbed onto Santa's lap for photos. His mother stood behind me, fixing her hair, not really paying attention. Santa leaned down, like he was listening to the boy. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the boy's face change. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Like someone had said his full name in a place where only nicknames were supposed to exist. The boy started crying. Quiet at first, then harder. His mother rushed forward, apologizing, trying to lift him down. "Sorry, he's just shy." But Santa held up a hand. Not forceful, just enough. The mother stopped. And I don't know why she stopped. There was nothing physically stopping her. Santa kept talking softly to the boy, his mouth close to the child's ear. The boy stopped crying. Just like that. Stopped mid-breath. Blinking. Calm. Too calm. Smile for the picture, Santa said. I took the photo. Flash went off. Then I printed it. And that's when the second red flag hit me. The boy wasn't in the photo. The chair was empty except for Santa. I looked at the screen. Checked again. Same thing. Empty lap. Santa smiling at nothing. I turned to the booth. The boy was still there in real life, standing next to his mother, holding her hand. Laughing. Like nothing had happened. My mouth went dry. I think there's an issue with the camera, I muttered. Santa leaned over, glancing at the print. No issue, he said calmly. His tone made my skin go cold. The rest of the shift, I kept checking. Every child who cried on his lap didn't appear in the photos. Not faded, not blurred, just missing, like they had never been there at all. But everyone remembered them. Parents still hugged them afterward, still held their hands, still talked about what they had just said to Santa, except the image refused to agree. By late afternoon, I was shaking a little. I tried to rationalize it. Bad printer. Faulty software. Lighting issue. Anything. But logic doesn't hold up well when reality keeps splitting in two directions. Around 5 p.m., the mall got quieter. Fewer families. Longer shadows stretching across the tiles. That's when Santa leaned toward me for the first time without a child between us. You're noticing, he said. It wasn't a question. I swallowed. Noticing what? He adjusted his gloves slowly. That some of them don't stay where they shouldn't. I stared at him. That's not normal. Santa gave a small shrug. Normal is just agreement, he said. Nothing more. A family approached before I could respond. Mother, father, little girl maybe 8 years old. The girl looked nervous before she even sat down. I remember that clearly, like she already knew something was wrong with the chair. Santa patted his knee. She hesitated, then climbed up. This time, I watched everything. The lean in, the whisper, the girl's face shifting from nervous to blank, then to something like relief, then fear again, tears, silent, running down her cheeks without sound. The mother stepped forward. Is she okay? Santa didn't answer. He just said, she remembers too much. The girl started shaking harder. The camera felt heavier in my hands. Hey, I said, stepping forward, maybe we should. Santa looked at me. Just looked. And I stopped talking. Not because I wanted to. Because something about his eyes felt like being interrupted mid-thought. I took the picture. Flash. Print. Hands shaking. I pulled the paper out. Empty chair. Empty lap. No child. The mother blinked. Where is she? She asked. The girl was standing beside her, holding her hand, smiling faintly. Mom, can we get hot chocolate after? The girl said. The mother laughed nervously. Of course, sweetheart. But she looked confused, like she couldn't remember why. That was when I started backing away from the booth. Slowly, trying not to draw attention. Santa noticed. Of course he did. You can leave if you want, he said. I stopped. But it won't matter, he added. My throat tightened. What does that mean? He leaned back in his chair. Some of them don't belong in the version you're standing in. I stared at him. That's insane. Is it? He asked softly. Before I could answer, he stood up. Slow. Careful. Like he wasn't used to moving quickly. He stepped closer to me. Close enough that I could smell pine and something older underneath it. Do you ever notice, he said quietly, how some children are remembered but never recorded? Or recorded but never remembered? My heart was pounding now. That's not real, I whispered. Santa smiled faintly. It is where I work. A loud crash from the mall entrance made me flinch. When I looked back, Santa was already sitting again, like he had never moved. A child was walking toward the booth. Alone. No parent. That should have been the final red flag. But what I noticed instead was worse. The mall security guard at the entrance didn't react. Didn't stop him. Didn't even look. Like the child was supposed to be there. The boy climbed onto Santa's lap. This time, I didn't even try to take a normal photo. I just watched. Santa leaned in, whispered. The boy's expression changed instantly. Terror. Absolute. He tried to get down, but Santa held him there gently. Not forcefully, just firmly enough that it didn't matter how much he struggled. I stepped forward. Let him go. Santa didn't look at me. He's already halfway gone, he said. What does that even mean? The boy stopped moving suddenly, like a switch had been turned off. His face went blank. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just absent. I took the photo anyway, hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the camera. Flash. Print. I looked at it. Empty chair. No boy. I turned to the booth. The boy was gone. Not running. Not leaving. Just not there. The mother from earlier walked past at that exact moment, holding her daughter's hand. She glanced at the booth, frowned slightly. Wasn't there a boy just here? She asked. Her daughter looked confused. No, she said. Santa was already standing behind me. I hadn't heard him move. You should go home, he said gently. I stepped back. What are you? He smiled. Not warmly. Not cruelly. Just tired. A correction, he said. That night, I left them all early. I told my manager I was sick. He didn't question it. Didn't even look up from his phone. At home, I dumped the camera footage onto my laptop. Every photo showed Santa. Every child. Except the ones who cried. Those spaces were just wrong. Like the world had edited them out mid-frame. I tried to show my roommate. She shrugged. Maybe it's a glitch, she said. But she wasn't convinced. Neither was I. I went back the next day anyway. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed proof it had happened. But when I arrived, the booth was gone. Completely. No decorations. No chair. No Santa. Just an empty tiled space where something had been for a long time. The mall manager told me Santa had finished his seasonal assignment. I asked what that meant. He frowned. What Santa? That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've checked the photos on my phone over and over. Most of them are normal now. But sometimes when I scroll too fast, I catch a frame that shouldn't be there. A child I don't recognize standing too close to Santa, looking directly at the camera. And last night, while I was reviewing them again, I heard something from my hallway. A slow, heavy sound, like boots on tile. 3 steps. Then a pause. Then a soft voice, almost amused, from right outside my door. You took good pictures, Jake. And I haven't opened the gallery since. Story 3. I used to love Christmas music in the car. Not in the annoying way, where people start playing it the second Halloween ends. I mean the real kind. The kind that only feels right when the windows are fogged at the edges, when the road is dark, and when everyone in the car is a little tired, but trying to pretend they aren't. That Christmas Eve, we were driving through the mountains to my parents' cabin. It was supposed to be simple. Leave by 4. Get there by 7. Eat my mom's overcooked ham. Watch my dad pretend not to cry during old Christmas movies. Wake up the next morning to my daughter Emma ripping open presents in the same living room where I used to do it. That was the plan. But of course, we left late. My husband, Caleb, blamed me because I forgot the bag with Emma's pajamas and had to run back inside. I blamed him because he insisted on checking the tire pressure, even though the car had just been serviced. Emma, who was 6 at the time, blamed both of us because we wouldn't let her open one present before we left. By the time we got on the highway, the sky had already turned that flat winter gray that makes everything feel farther away. I remember looking at Caleb's hands on the steering wheel. He had one thumb hooked over the leather, relaxed like always. He was good at seeming calm. It was one of the things I loved about him, and one of the things that drove me insane. You know my mom's going to say something, I said, glancing at the clock on the dashboard. Caleb didn't take his eyes off the road. Your mom says something if we're early. She'll say it in that voice. What voice? I gave him my best impression. We were starting to worry. He laughed under his breath. That is exactly her voice. From the back seat, Emma kicked her boots softly against the seat. Are we almost there? No, Caleb and I said at the same time. She groaned like we had ruined her life. The first hour was normal. Boring even. We passed gas stations with wreaths taped to the windows, fast food places glowing in the snow, and little towns with plastic reindeer on rooftops. Emma watched a movie on her tablet until the battery got low, then complained until I gave her my phone. The snow started around mile marker 118. At first, it was pretty. Soft flakes drifting through the headlights. The kind of snow that makes you feel like you're inside a snow globe. Caleb even smiled and said, "Now it feels like Christmas." I should have told him to turn around then. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe because the road was still clear. Maybe because my parents were already waiting. Maybe because every adult reaches a point where they confuse inconvenience with danger, and they keep going because stopping feels dramatic. 20 minutes later, the highway narrowed into a mountain road, and the snow stopped looking pretty. It came sideways. The trees on both sides of the road bent under the wind. The white lines disappeared, then came back in broken flashes. Our tires made that soft crunching sound over packed snow, and every few seconds, the back of the car shifted just enough to make my stomach tighten. I turned the radio down. Caleb glanced at me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just hard to see." "It's fine. I'm going slow." He was going 32 miles an hour. It felt too fast. My phone had no service by then. Caleb's had one bar that kept appearing and vanishing like it was teasing us. The GPS still showed the route, but the little arrow moved through blank gray space with no signal. Emma leaned forward between the seats. "Can we listen to Christmas songs?" "Your tablet still has music," I said. "It died." "Of course it did," Caleb muttered. I pressed the power button on the radio. Static filled the car, harsh and sudden. Caleb flinched. "Sorry," I said, turning the dial. Static. A burst of voices. More static. A country station that faded after 3 seconds. Then nothing. I kept searching because Emma was already whining, and I was trying to keep the mood light. I landed on an old song, faint at first, then suddenly clear. Too clear. A choir sang softly over the speakers, warm and bright, like the sound was coming from a record player in another room. Emma stopped kicking the seat. "There," I said. "Christmas music." Caleb frowned at the dashboard. "That's weird." "What?" "I didn't think anything came in up here. Maybe it's local." The song ended with a crackle. Then a man's voice came on. He sounded old. Not elderly exactly, but old-fashioned. Smooth. Cheerful. The kind of voice you imagine coming through a radio in the 1950s. "Well, good evening to all you holiday travelers out there," he said. "You're listening to KNOE, the Christmas station that always finds you." I smiled a little. "That's creepy marketing." Caleb didn't smile. The host chuckled softly, as if he had heard me. "We've got a cold night ahead, folks. Snow on the ridges, ice in the valleys, and plenty of families trying to make it home before Santa does." Emma giggled. "He said Santa." I reached back and squeezed her mitten. "See? Festive." The host continued. "This next one goes out to the Miller family, making their way up Route 19 tonight. Caleb at the wheel, Mia riding shotgun, and little Emma in the back, who has been very patient." The car went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Even the wind seemed to pull away for 1 second. Caleb's eyes flicked to mine. I looked at the radio display. No station name. No numbers. Just 3 green dashes. Emma laughed. "He said my name." I turned the volume down. Caleb spoke carefully. "Did your mom call something in?" "With what signal?" He didn't answer. I tried to make my face normal before looking back at Emma. Maybe there are other Millers. With Caleb and Mia and Emma? Caleb said. I gave him a look. Not in front of her. He pressed his lips together and looked back at the road. The song started. Something bright and familiar, bells and soft voices. I don't remember the title. I remember watching the radio like it had become a living thing. A minute passed. Then 2. Nothing happened. I forced a laugh. Okay, that was weird. Maybe it picked up a police scanner or something, Caleb said. That doesn't make sense. I know. Emma had already stopped caring. She pressed her face to the cold window and drew shapes in the fog with one finger. I told myself it was a coincidence, a prank, some local holiday broadcast where people called in names. Maybe my mom had done it earlier, before we lost service. Maybe Caleb had arranged it and was pretending to be confused. That thought actually comforted me. For about 5 minutes. Then the host came back. That was for Emma, who will want to look out the right side window in just a moment. But don't look too long, sweetheart. Some things in the woods look back. My skin tightened. Turn it off, I said. Caleb reached for the power button. Before he touched it, Emma gasped. Mommy. I turned around. She was staring out the right side of the car, her face close to the glass. What is it? There's somebody there. Caleb slowed. No, I said too quickly. Don't stop. I'm not stopping. I leaned across the center console and looked through Emma's window. At first, I saw only trees, dark trunks, snow whipping through the headlights. Then, between 2 pines, a shape stood near the road. A person. Maybe. They were too still. They wore something pale, or maybe they were covered in snow. Their head was tilted down, and one arm hung at their side. We passed before I could see more. Emma started crying. Caleb kept driving, but his posture changed. Both hands on the wheel now. Shoulders high. Jaw tight. What was that? I whispered. Probably a sign. It wasn't a sign. I know, he snapped, then immediately softened. I know. I'm sorry. I reached back and grabbed Emma's hand. It's okay, baby. It was probably just a snowman. In the woods, she cried. Some people make snowmen in weird places. That was the kind of stupid thing parents say when they have no idea what else to say. The radio stayed off for maybe 30 seconds. Then it turned itself back on. Not loud. Just enough. Static first. Then that same cheerful voice. Well now, that gave everyone a fright, didn't it? Caleb hit the power button. Nothing happened. He hit it again, harder. The voice continued. Roads like these have memories. You drive them enough, you learn where the bends are, where the ice settles, where the trees fall first. Caleb started pressing every button on the console. Caleb, I said. I'm trying. Just focus on the road. The host's voice warmed, almost tender. This next song is for Mia, who always worries before anyone else admits they should. I stopped breathing. Caleb looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw real fear on his face. The song began. A slow one. I don't remember the words. I only remember the feeling of it, like something old and lonely drifting through the car. Emma cried quietly in the back seat, and I kept rubbing her hand with my thumb, telling her it was okay, telling her we were almost there, even though neither of those things felt true. The snow thickened. The headlights showed only a short white tunnel ahead. Everything outside that tunnel was gone. Then the music cut off in the middle of a note. The host whispered, "Slow down for the deer." Caleb's foot moved to the brake. A deer burst from the left side of the road. It appeared out of nowhere. Thin legs, wide eyes, a flash of brown and white. Caleb swerved. The car slid. Emma screamed. For one awful second, we were sideways, drifting toward the edge of the road where the snow dropped into darkness. Caleb corrected, too hard, then corrected again. The tires caught. The car jerked back into the lane. A horn blared behind us. I looked back and saw headlights through the snow. A truck. Too close. Caleb steadied the wheel, breathing hard. No one spoke. The radio crackled. Good save, Caleb. I grabbed the volume knob and twisted it down until it stopped. The voice faded, but didn't disappear. It stayed under the speakers like a whisper trapped inside the dashboard. I wanted to cry, not in a dramatic way, in a tired, frustrated, terrified way. I wanted to be in my parents' kitchen, annoyed at my mother. I wanted Emma in pajamas. I wanted Caleb making some dumb joke about my dad's dry ham. Instead, we were crawling up a mountain in a snowstorm, while an impossible voice said our names. Turn around, I said. Caleb swallowed. There's nowhere to turn. Then stop. Where? I looked out at the narrow road, the steep snowbank, the drop-off hidden somewhere beyond it. I knew he was right. That made it worse. We kept driving. The truck behind us stayed there. At first, I thought it was just another driver stuck in the same storm. Its headlights hung behind us, sometimes close, sometimes fading back. But after 10 minutes, it was still there. Every curve we took, it took. Every time Caleb slowed, it slowed. "Is that truck following us?" I asked. Caleb glanced in the mirror. "Probably just wants to stay behind someone. Or wants us to go faster." "I'm not going faster." The radio clicked. This time, the host didn't sound cheerful. "This one goes out to the man in the blue pickup behind the Millers. Sir, it's Christmas Eve. Give them room." Caleb and I looked at each other. Blue pickup. The headlights behind us dipped closer. The radio host sighed. "Some people don't listen." The truck's horn blasted. Emma screamed again. The pickup swerved into the opposite lane, trying to pass us on a blind curve. "Don't let him," I said, though I didn't know what I meant. Caleb gripped the wheel. "I'm not doing anything." The truck pulled alongside us. For a few seconds, I could see it through Caleb's window. Blue, just like the voice said. The driver's face was shadowed under a hood. He didn't look over. He just kept pushing forward, tires throwing snow, engine growling. Then headlights appeared around the bend. An oncoming car. Caleb shouted something and braked. The blue pickup jerked right, clipping the snowbank ahead of us. Its rear end swung out. The oncoming car slid toward the shoulder. For 1 second, all three vehicles seemed to be moving without control. Then the pickup corrected and shot ahead, disappearing into the storm. The oncoming car passed with inches to spare. I tasted metal in my mouth from biting my tongue. The radio host exhaled slowly. "Close one." Caleb slammed his hand against the dashboard. "What do you want?" Emma started sobbing harder. I turned around, unbuckled my seat belt just enough to reach her, and pulled her forward against the back of my seat. "Don't listen to it," I whispered. "Listen to me." "But he knows us." "I know." "How?" I had no answer. Caleb drove another mile before we saw the blue pickup again. It was stopped sideways across the road. The front end had smashed into a tree. Steam rose from under the hood. One headlight pointed up into the falling snow. Caleb slowed. "No," I said. "We have to see if he's hurt." "No, we don't." "Mia." "No. Something is wrong. Everything is wrong." The radio clicked. The host's voice returned, low and serious. "Caleb is a good man. Good men stop. That's how the road keeps them." Caleb's face went pale. He stopped the car anyway. Not close. Maybe 20 feet behind the pickup. Snow beat against the windshield. The wipers dragged back and forth, barely keeping up. The blue pickup's driver's side door hung open. No one moved inside. "Stay here," Caleb said. I grabbed his sleeve. "Don't. I'm just checking." "Caleb, please." He looked at me then, and I saw the argument happening inside him. Husband. Father. Decent person. Scared man. All of those versions fighting over the same decision. Then he said, "Lock the doors after I get out." He opened his door. Cold air rushed into the car. "Daddy," Emma cried. "I'll be right back, Bug." He stepped into the snow and shut the door. I locked it instantly. Through the windshield, I watched him approach the pickup. His coat whipped in the wind. His boots slipped once, but he caught himself. He called out, though I couldn't hear the words. The radio started humming. Not music, just a low, soft hum, like someone thinking. Caleb reached the open door of the pickup and leaned in. The radio host whispered, "Mia, tell him to come back." I slapped the window button by mistake, then fumbled with the lock. "Caleb!" I screamed through the glass. He didn't hear me. The host spoke again, sharper. "Tell him now." I hit the horn. One long blast. Caleb jerked upright and looked back at us. Behind him, from the trees beyond the pickup, a figure moved. My body went cold. Someone was standing there. Not the driver. This person was taller, hunched against the storm, one hand braced against a tree. I couldn't see a face. Only the dark outline of a hood. "Caleb!" I screamed. He saw the figure at the same time. He ran. The person stepped out from the trees. Not fast. That was the worst part. They didn't hurry. They just walked toward him like they already knew how far he could get. Caleb slipped halfway back to the car, hit one knee, then scrambled up. I unlocked the doors. He reached us, yanked the handle, and threw himself inside. "Drive!" I shouted. He didn't argue. He reversed so hard the tires spun. The car fishtailed, then caught. He backed up, angled around the pickup as much as he could, scraping through the snowbank. The figure stood beside the wrecked truck now, watching. As we passed, Emma buried her face in her blanket. I looked straight ahead because I knew if I saw that person clearly, whatever was left of my calm would break. We got around the pickup. Caleb accelerated. Not fast enough to be reckless, but faster than before. No one spoke for a while. His breathing was ragged. Mine wasn't much better. Emma had gone quiet in the back, which scared me more than crying. "What did you see in the truck?" I asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. "Caleb." There was no one inside. "What?" "No blood. No driver. Nothing. Just," he swallowed. "The radio was on." I looked at him. He kept his eyes fixed ahead. It was playing the same station. I pressed my hand over my mouth. The radio in our car clicked again. The host sounded pleased. And now, for the whole Miller family, a holiday reminder. Bridges freeze before roads. Ahead, the road curved downhill. The GPS, still frozen on the screen, showed a thin blue line crossing over a river. A bridge. "Stop," I said. Caleb eased off the gas. The car rolled down the slope. "Caleb, stop." "I'm trying." The brake pedal made a dull grinding sound. The car didn't stop. It slowed, but not enough. The road had turned glossy beneath the snow. Black ice. I could see it now in the headlights, a slick shine stretching across the bridge. Caleb pumped the brakes. The steering wheel trembled. "Don't brake hard," I said, even though I knew nothing about driving on ice beyond things I had read online. "I'm not." We slid onto the bridge. The tires lost contact with the world. There is a specific kind of silence that happens when a car slides on ice. The engine still runs. People still breathe. The storm still hits the windows. But underneath it all, there's a weightless quiet, like the road has let go of you. The car drifted toward the guardrail. Caleb turned gently. Too gently. Not enough. The right side bumped the rail. Emma screamed. The car scraped along metal, sparks flashing orange in the dark. Caleb corrected again. The back end swung left. For 1 second, we faced the side of the bridge, looking out over black water far below. Then the tires caught. The car lurched forward and rolled off the bridge onto snow-packed road. Caleb didn't stop until we were safely past it. Then he pulled over as much as he could and put the car in park. His hands stayed on the wheel. I realized he was shaking. I had never seen Caleb shake before. I reached for him, but he pulled away just enough that my hand stopped midair. Not because he was angry, because if I touched him, he might fall apart. The radio played a cheerful burst of bells. Then the host said, "Almost midnight." I looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. We were still 30 minutes from the cabin, maybe more in the storm. "Call my dad," I said. "No service." "Try." He tried. I tried. Nothing. The radio host cleared his throat. "This next dedication is a little unusual. It hasn't happened yet." Caleb turned slowly toward the dashboard. The host continued, "In 13 minutes, just past the old ranger station, Caleb will see lights on the road. Mia will tell him not to stop. Emma will ask why that man is waving." Emma whimpered. "And then," the host said softly, "they will make the wrong choice." I grabbed the radio knob and twisted it so hard my fingers hurt. "Shut up!" The voice cut through the speakers anyway. They always do. I don't know what broke in me then. Maybe fear. Maybe patience. Maybe that thin layer of politeness people keep even when they're terrified. I leaned toward the dashboard and screamed, "Who are you?" For the first time, the host did not answer right away. Static filled the car. Then very faintly we heard another sound beneath it. A child crying. Not Emma. A woman breathing hard. A man saying, "Stay with me." Caleb's face went slack. I knew that voice. It was his. Not how he sounded then, sitting beside me. Different. Raw. Panicked. The broadcast cut back to music. Caleb put the car in drive. No, I said. We need to wait. For what? I don't know. We can't sit here all night. We'll freeze. He was right. The heater was working, but the gas gauge was below half, and the storm showed no sign of stopping. Behind us was the bridge. Behind that, the pickup. Ahead was the ranger station. Every choice felt like a trap, so we kept driving. At 11:56, we saw the ranger station. It was a small dark building set back from the road, half buried in snow. There was a wooden sign out front, swinging in the wind. No lights. No cars. Then, beyond it, 2 red lights appeared in the road. Flares. Caleb slowed. Mia, he said. I see them. A man stood near the flares, waving both arms. Emma's voice came from the back seat, tiny and trembling. Why is that man waving? My heart dropped. The man wore a dark jacket with reflective strips. He looked like a ranger or a state trooper. Snow coated his shoulders. One hand held a flashlight. He pointed toward the shoulder, urgently telling us to stop. Caleb's foot hovered over the brake. Don't, I whispered. He might need help. He might not be real. Mia, there are flares. I don't care. The man stepped closer, shining the flashlight directly at us. Caleb slowed more. The radio host whispered, Here it is. The man outside slapped one hand on the hood. I screamed. Caleb hit the brakes. The car stopped. The man came around to Caleb's window. His face was mostly covered by a scarf. Only his eyes showed. Caleb lowered the window 1 inch. Cold air sliced through. Roads closed ahead, the man shouted. Tree came down. You need to turn around. Caleb looked at me. I shook my head. The man leaned closer. Sir, did you hear me? The radio host spoke softly through the speakers. Ask him his name. I didn't want to obey that voice. But I did. What's your name? I called. The man's eyes moved to me. What? Your name, I said louder. He paused. Too long. Then he said, Officer Grant. Caleb looked at his jacket. There was no badge. No patch. No name tag. The radio host said, There is no Officer Grant on this mountain tonight. The man's eyes flicked toward the dashboard. He heard it. That was the moment I knew. Whatever was happening, he heard it too. His hand shot through the window gap and grabbed Caleb's coat. Caleb slammed the gas. The car lunged forward. The man's arm jerked free. He stumbled back and vanished into the storm behind us. The flares disappeared in the rear window. Emma was screaming again. Caleb drove too fast now. Slow down, I said. He grabbed me. I know, but slow down. He grabbed me. Caleb. He kept going. The radio host sounded almost sad. Panic makes poor drivers of good men. Stop talking, Caleb said. The road bent left. The headlights caught something across the lane. A tree. Not huge, but large enough. Its trunk blocked most of the road, branches clawing into the snowbank on the opposite side. Caleb hit the brakes. The car slid. The tree came closer. Too close. Caleb turned right, trying to squeeze around it. The passenger side dropped. I felt it before I understood it. The road wasn't there. The snowbank had hidden the edge. For one weightless second, the car tipped. Caleb shouted my name. Emma screamed, Mommy. Then we went over. I don't remember the crash the way movies show crashes. There was no clear sequence. No dramatic slow motion. Just noise. Metal. Glass. My body jerking against the seat belt. The world turning white, then black, then white again. A hard stop. Then nothing but the ticking sound of the engine. I opened my eyes upside down. For a second, I didn't know where I was. My hair hung in my face. Something warm ran down my cheek, but I didn't feel pain yet. The windshield was cracked into a spiderweb. Snow pressed against part of it from outside. The car had landed on its roof in a ditch below the road. Caleb groaned beside me. Emma was crying in the back. That sound saved me. It pulled me back into my body. Emma, I gasped. Baby, talk to me. I'm scared. I know. Are you hurt? My arm hurts. Okay. Don't move. Caleb coughed. Mia? I'm here. You okay? I think so. That wasn't true. I didn't know if I was okay. I knew I was awake. That felt like enough. The radio was still on. Of course it was. Static hissed through the overturned car. Then a voice came through. Not the host. Caleb's voice. Stay with me. Mia, stay with me. My blood went cold. Caleb froze beside me. From the speakers came my own voice, weak and shaking. Emma. Where's Emma? Then Caleb again. She's here. She's okay. I need you to keep your eyes open. I looked at Caleb. His mouth was slightly open. He was not speaking. The recording continued. My voice sobbed. The radio. Then Emma crying. Then the host, gentle and bright. Well, folks, midnight has arrived. The dashboard clock flickered. 12 o'clock. The host continued. You've been listening to KNOE, the Christmas station that always finds you. Caleb whispered, no. The speakers crackled. Then came a sound I will never forget. A phone ringing. Not ours. A landline. Old-fashioned. Distant. The host answered cheerfully. You're on the air. And then I heard myself. Not the me hanging upside down in the car. Another me. Breathless. Far away. Shaking so badly I could barely speak. Please, my voice said through the radio. If anyone can hear this, we crashed off Route 19. Past the ranger station. Near the bridge. My husband's hurt. My daughter's in the back. Please send help. Caleb stared at the speakers. I couldn't move. The host said, and what song would you like to dedicate tonight, Mia? My recorded voice sobbed. I don't care. Just please help us. The host chuckled softly. Help is a kind of song. The broadcast filled with static. Then music began. Soft bells. A choir. A Christmas song playing from somewhere far away, warm and impossible, while the three of us hung trapped in the wrecked car below the road. I don't know how long we were there. Time became strange after that. Caleb managed to unbuckle himself and fall against the roof with a sound that made him curse under his breath. He crawled into the back to check Emma. I couldn't get my seat belt loose at first. My fingers were numb. My hands wouldn't work right. The radio kept playing. Every few minutes, the host would speak. Not predictions anymore. Directions. Flash the headlights, Caleb. He did. Kick the rear window twice, Mia. Not 3 times. Twice. I did. Emma, sweetheart, keep singing so your mother can hear you. And she did. A trembling little Christmas song, broken by sobs. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like the voice helped us. Maybe it did. That's the part one still can't explain without feeling sick. At 12:38 a.m., we saw red and blue lights flashing through the snow above us. A passing snowplow had seen our headlights flickering below the road. The driver called emergency services from the ranger station, where the landline still worked. That's what the police told us later. They said we were lucky. They said another 10 minutes in that cold could have changed everything. Caleb had a fractured wrist and bruised ribs. Emma's arm was sprained, not broken. I needed stitches near my hairline and had bruises so dark they looked painted on. We spent Christmas morning in a hospital. My parents arrived before dawn. My mother cried so hard she couldn't speak. My father hugged Caleb with both arms and kept saying, "You got them out. You got them out." Nobody believed the radio part. Not really. The state trooper who took our statement listened politely while Caleb explained the station, the names, the warnings, the man near the ranger station, the voice from the future. The trooper wrote things down, nodded, then said trauma can make memories overlap. I understood why he said that. I would have said the same thing. But Caleb and I remembered the same details. So did Emma, especially the host. A week later, Caleb went to the tow yard to collect what was left from the car. I didn't go with him. I couldn't. Just the thought of seeing it made my chest tighten. When he came home, he was quiet. Too quiet. He placed a plastic grocery bag on the kitchen table. Inside were a few things they had pulled from the wreck. Emma's stuffed rabbit. My cracked sunglasses. The Christmas card my mother had mailed us early, because she forgot we were coming. And the radio. Not the whole dashboard. Just part of the unit, broken out during the salvage. I stared at it. Why would you bring that here? Caleb wouldn't look at me. The tow guy gave it to me. Said it was loose. Throw it away. I will. Now. He nodded, but he didn't move. That night, after Emma went to sleep, I found him in the garage. He had the radio on his workbench. A small battery pack sat beside it. My stomach dropped. Caleb. He looked ashamed. I just needed to know. Know what? If it would still work. The garage was cold. Our breath fogged faintly in the air. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then the broken radio crackled. No wires connected to the car. No antenna. No reason for sound to come out of it. Static filled the garage. Caleb stepped back. The same old-fashioned voice came through, soft and smiling. Well, good evening to all you holiday travelers out there. I grabbed Caleb's arm. The host continued. This next one goes out to the Miller family, safe at home for now. For now. That was the phrase. Not safe at home. Safe at home for now. The radio played 3 soft notes of a Christmas song. Then the host laughed quietly and said, Mia, you really should have thrown me away when you had the chance. Caleb ripped the battery pack off the table. The radio went silent. The next morning, he drove it to the dump himself. He swears he watched the worker toss it into a compactor. He swears he stayed until it was crushed. I believe him. I do. But every Christmas Eve since then, I wake up a few minutes before midnight. The house is always quiet. Caleb asleep beside me. Emma older now, tucked safely in her room. No snow most years. No mountains. No radio in our bedroom. And still, from somewhere downstairs, faint enough that I can almost pretend it isn't real, I hear static. Then bells. Then that cheerful voice, warm as a fireplace. Good evening, Mia. And this year, for the first time, it added something new. Emma is old enough to drive now, isn't she? Story 4. I didn't think much about Christmas traditions anymore. After you hit your late teens, everything starts feeling recycled anyway. Same decorations, same food, same forced family conversations that loop back to work, weather, and whatever relative is doing well this year. So when my grandmother sent me the advent calendar, I almost didn't open it. It arrived in a plain brown box. No branding. No return address sticker except a handwritten label in her shaky handwriting. For Mia. Don't let anyone open it before December 1 SD. Asterisk asterisk. That last part should have been nothing. She always wrote instructions like that, overly serious about small things. Still, it made me pause. I remember holding the box in my hallway, keys still in my hand, just staring at it longer than I should have. Inside was a handmade wooden frame. Not plastic like store calendars. Real wood. Dark stained, slightly uneven, like it had been carved instead of manufactured. 24 tiny doors, each with a small brass latch. On the back, another note. Open only 1 door per day. Do not skip. Asterisk asterisk. I laughed a little. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like her. Overdramatic. Controlling in a soft way. I put it on my dresser and forgot about it for the night. That was the first mistake. On December 1st, I opened door 1. Behind it was a small paper card. A drawing of my kitchen. Not a generic kitchen. Mine. Same crooked cabinet above the sink. Same chipped mug on the counter. And in the drawing, my mother was standing there holding a plate. It wasn't unusual yet. My mom cooks every morning. I didn't think much of it until that evening. She dropped a ceramic plate while drying it. It shattered exactly the way it looked in the drawing. I remember standing barefoot in the kitchen, watching her freeze mid-motion. Damn it, she said. That was my favorite one. I laughed it off. Coincidence, I said, but I didn't sound convinced. Door 2 showed a burned dinner. Simple sketch. Smoke curling from a pan. A slightly open window. That night, my dad forgot something on the stove. Smoke alarm went off. The house smelled like charred oil for hours. My mother didn't laugh it off this time. She looked annoyed. Not at the fire. At me. Where did you get that calendar? She asked. I told her the truth. Grandma sent it. She went quiet in a way that didn't feel normal. She didn't send anything here, she said finally. But I showed her the box. She didn't respond to that, just walked away like the conversation ended on her side. By door 5, I started feeling something I didn't like admitting. Anticipation, not excitement. Something closer to dread mixed with curiosity. Each door showed something small, always domestic. Always later that same day. A neighbor's dog escaping its leash. A glass breaking during dinner. My father missing a call from work that would annoy him later. It wasn't dramatic. That made it worse. Because it never predicted disasters. Just reality. Like it was recording it before it happened. Door 7 had something different. No drawing. Just a sentence written in thin ink. Someone will arrive tonight. Don't let them in immediately. Asterisk asterisk. That was the first time I actually felt cold reading it. I remember sitting on my bed holding it longer than I should have. I even considered not opening the door at all. But the rules were clear. 1 per day. No skipping. So I waited. That evening, just after sunset, the doorbell rang. My mom called from the kitchen. "Mia, can you get that?" I hesitated before opening the door. A man stood outside. Mid-40s maybe. Clean jacket. Calm face. Carrying a small parcel. "Delivery for your mother," he said. No logo. No company name. Just a brown envelope. My stomach tightened for reasons I couldn't explain. The calendar hadn't been wrong yet. I told him to wait and closed the door halfway. When I turned back, my mother was already there. She took the parcel from him without hesitation. Like she expected it. That detail stuck with me more than anything else. By door 10, I stopped showing my parents. They'd started reacting badly. Not fear exactly. More like discomfort. Like I was doing something inappropriate by even mentioning it. So I kept it to myself. Each morning I'd sit on my bed and open a door alone. And each night, I'd watch something from it happen. The worst part wasn't accuracy. It was tone. Nothing was ever framed as important. Just inevitable. Like the house was following instructions. Like we were. Door 12 showed something that made me sit on the floor for a long time afterward. A sketch of my hallway. The front door slightly open. And me standing too close to it. That evening, I argued with my parents. I don't even remember why it started. Something small. Probably about privacy. My father raised his voice. My mother told me I was imagining patterns where none exist. Then the doorbell rang again. Same man. Different parcel. This time my father signed without reading it. When I asked later what it was, he said, "None of your business." That was the first time I noticed the house felt less like mine, and more like something I was temporarily allowed to live in. Door 16 changed everything. Behind it was a key. Real metal. Cold. Heavier than it should have been. No drawing this time. Just a label taped inside the compartment. The last door is not part of the calendar. It is part of the house. Asterisk asterisk. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about it. The last door. Part of the house. That didn't make sense. At least not in any normal way. But nothing about the last 2 weeks felt normal anymore. I tried to ignore it until Christmas Eve. I really did. But every small event kept happening exactly as predicted. And my parents, they stopped questioning anything at all. That was what scared me most. Not disbelief. Acceptance. Like they already knew how it would end. Christmas Eve morning, I opened door 24. It wasn't a picture. It was just a message. Use the key. That was it. No explanation. No drawing. Just those 2 words. My hands were shaking before I even stood up. I held the key in my palm for a long time. Then I walked through the house. I don't know why I expected resistance. Maybe I thought the door would be hidden. Maybe locked behind something obvious. But it wasn't. It was in the hallway. The far end. Between my parents' room and the storage closet. A door I had walked past my entire life without ever really looking at. I had always assumed it was a wall panel. It blended in too well. My father saw me holding the key. He didn't stop me. He didn't even ask questions. He just said quietly, So it's time. That line still doesn't sit right with me. The key fit perfectly. One turn. A soft click. The door opened without resistance. Behind it wasn't darkness. It was a room. Lit. Clean. Too clean. Like no one actually lived there. But the air was warm. And familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. There were photos on the walls. Me. At different ages. School pictures I didn't remember giving anyone. Candids I didn't know existed. One of me sleeping. Taken from the doorway of my bedroom. My breathing stopped completely when I saw that one. In the corner of the room was a desk. On it, another advent calendar. Identical to mine. Already filled. Already waiting. And next to it, my grandmother's handwriting. A note. You were never meant to open the house alone. Behind me, I heard the door close. Not slam. Just close. Softly. Like someone had done it gently. My mother's voice came from the hallway outside. Calm. Too calm. We thought you'd remember this room eventually. I turned. But the hallway behind the glass panel looked wrong. Longer than it should have been. And I could have sworn there were more doors now than there used to be. Some slightly open. Some not. And the advent calendar on the desk behind me. One of its tiny doors had already started to open on its own. Story 5. I used to love snow when I was a kid. Not just because school got canceled, though that was obviously part of it. I loved how quiet everything became after a storm. Our whole town would disappear under white, and for a few hours, it felt like the world had been erased and redrawn softer. I was 13 that winter, old enough to pretend I wasn't scared of anything, but young enough that I still slept with my closet door shut. We lived in a 2-story house at the edge of a small town in northern Pennsylvania. Not completely isolated, but close enough that our backyard ended in a line of dark pine trees, and beyond those trees was nothing but fields, frozen creeks, and old hunting paths people said not to walk alone. My bedroom was upstairs, facing the backyard. That detail matters. At the time, it didn't feel important. It was just my room. Posters on the wall. A little desk under the window. A squeaky radiator that clicked all night. A bed pushed into the corner so I could see the TV without moving my head. Normal kid stuff. That December had been colder than usual. The kind of cold that made the inside of your nose sting when you breathed in. Christmas break was supposed to start on Friday, and everyone at school was already checked out. Teachers were showing movies. Kids were handing out candy canes. Nobody cared about homework. Except something else was happening in town. People were going missing. Not a lot at first. Just enough that adults lowered their voices when they talked about it. The first was a man named Mr. Harlan, who ran the little hardware store near Main Street. My dad knew him. Everyone knew him. He was the kind of guy who kept a jar of lollipops by the register and gave kids free batteries for toys if their parents were short on cash. He vanished on a Tuesday night after closing the store. His truck was still parked behind the building. The lights were off. The back door was locked. No sign of a fight. No note. My parents didn't tell me much. Adults never do when they think they're protecting you. But I heard enough through walls and half-open doors. Maybe he just left, my mom said one night. My dad answered, with his wallet still on the counter? Then they went quiet. The second person was a high school girl named Elise Vernon. She was 17, older than me, one of those girls everyone recognized because she worked weekends at the diner. She disappeared walking home after a shift. After that, parents started picking kids up from school. Porch lights stayed on. People locked doors they used to leave open. My mom started checking my window locks every night. I remember teasing her about it. "Mom, I'm on the second floor." She looked at me in this weird way, like she wanted to say something but decided not to. "Just humor me, Ben." So I did. The first snowman showed up 3 days before Christmas. I woke up before my alarm because my room felt too bright. Snow had fallen overnight, heavy and clean, covering the backyard in one smooth sheet. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and looked out the window. There was a snowman standing near the pine trees. At first, I smiled. It was a good one. Big round base. Smaller middle. head sitting slightly crooked. 2 branches for arms, pebbles for eyes and buttons. It faced my house. That was the first small thing that bothered me. Not enough to scare me, just enough to make me pause. Most kids would build a snowman facing the yard or the street, like it was greeting people. This one was turned directly toward my bedroom window. I leaned closer to the glass. It wore a brown knit cap. I didn't think much of it then. I went downstairs in my socks, still half asleep, and found my dad standing by the coffee machine in his work pants, staring at his phone. "Someone built a snowman in the backyard," I said. He looked up. "What?" "In the backyard. By the trees." My mom was at the stove making eggs. Probably the Morgan boys. The Morgans lived 2 houses down. They were twins, both around 10, and they were always doing annoying little things. Throwing snowballs at mailboxes, ringing doorbells, leaving plastic spiders in people's flower pots. My dad walked to the back door and looked out. "Huh," he said. "That was it. Just huh." I stood next to him and pointed. "It's kind of creepy, right?" He smiled without looking at me. "It's a snowman, bud. It's facing my window. Maybe it likes you." My mom laughed softly, but I could tell she was distracted. Dad stepped onto the back porch in his slippers, holding his coffee like he was inspecting his kingdom. He didn't go into the yard. The snow was too deep, and he had to leave for work. "I'll talk to the Morgans later," he said, coming back inside. No big deal. But when he shut the door, I noticed him lock it. That day was normal enough. School was strange, though. Everyone was talking about Elise. Teachers kept telling us not to spread rumors, which of course made everyone spread more. Someone said she had run away with a boyfriend. Someone else said a truck driver had grabbed her. Someone whispered that Mr. Harlan and Elise were connected somehow. I didn't say much. All I could think about was the snowman. When I got home, it was still there. Same place. Same crooked head. Same brown hat. Only now, from the kitchen window, I could see the hat better. It had a little tear near the folded brim. Something about that tugged at my memory. That night, after dinner, my dad called the Morgan boys' father. I was pretending to watch TV in the living room, but I listened to every word. "Hey Gary," Dad said. "Quick question. Your boys messing around in our backyard last night?" A pause. No, nothing serious. Just a snowman." Another pause. Dad's smile faded a little. "Oh, all right. No problem." He hung up. My mom looked at him from the couch. "Well," he rubbed his jaw. "Gary says the boys have been at their grandmother's since Sunday." The room got quiet. I sat up. "So who made it?" Dad looked at me, then back out toward the dark kitchen windows. "Probably some other kids." But he didn't sound convinced. The next morning, there were 2 snowmen. I remember the feeling before I even saw them. That strange pressure in my chest, like my body knew before my brain did. My eyes opened. Gray light filled the room. The radiator clicked. Somewhere downstairs, my mom was running water in the sink. I turned my head toward the window. The first snowman was still near the pine trees. The second one stood about 15 feet closer to the house. Same shape. Same blank pebble eyes. Same branch arms reaching slightly outward. This one wore a red scarf. I got out of bed slowly. The floor was cold under my feet. I walked to the window and pressed my fingers against the glass. The scarf fluttered in the wind. I knew that scarf. I had seen it before around Elise Vernon's neck at the diner. Red, with white stripes near the ends. I tried to tell myself scarves weren't unique. Lots of people had red scarves. Maybe I had seen one like it. Maybe my brain was trying to connect things because everyone in town was scared. Still, I stood there for a long time. Then I ran downstairs. My mom was pouring orange juice. My dad was tying his boots. "There's another one," I said. Dad looked tired. "Another what?" "Snowman." He didn't move for a second. Then he went to the back door. My mom followed. The 3 of us stood there looking out at them. Nobody joked this time. My mom whispered, "Why would someone do that?" Dad unlocked the door and stepped onto the porch. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hey!" he shouted. His voice went out across the yard and died in the snow. No answer. The trees stood still and dark. Dad turned back to us. "Stay inside." He pulled on his coat and went into the backyard. I watched him from the glass. He walked carefully, boots sinking deep, leaving a trail behind him. He stopped at the closer snowman first. He reached for the red scarf. My mom's hand landed on my shoulder. "Don't look so scared," she said, but her voice was shaking. Dad untied the scarf and stared at it. Then he turned toward the trees, scanning them. For a few seconds, he didn't move. Then he walked to the first snowman, the one with the brown hat. He took that too. When he came back inside, his face was pale. "What?" my mom asked. Dad shut the door and locked it. "Nothing," he said too quickly. My mom reached for the scarf. "Let me see." He hesitated. That scared me more than anything. Finally, he handed it over. Mom turned the scarf in her hands. Her mouth opened a little, but no sound came out. "What?" I asked. Dad looked at me. "Go upstairs, Ben." "No." "What is it?" "Now." I hated when he used that voice. The final voice. The one that meant I was still a kid and didn't get to ask questions. So I went upstairs. But I didn't go to my room. I crouched at the top of the stairs and listened. My mom was crying quietly. Dad said, "It's Elise's." I saw her mother post a picture. Same scarf. Mom whispered, "And the hat?" Dad didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Harlan wore one like it at the store." My stomach dropped. I crawled backward from the stairs and sat on the hallway floor. For a while, I couldn't move. The police came that afternoon. 2 officers walked around the backyard with my dad. They took the hat and scarf in plastic bags. They asked questions in the kitchen. Had we seen anyone? Heard anything? Did we have cameras? Did anyone dislike us? My dad kept saying no. My mom kept twisting her wedding ring. One officer came upstairs and looked out my bedroom window. He was a big man with a shaved head and a kind face. He tried to smile at me. "You sleep in here?" I nodded. "Notice anything weird at night?" "No." "You hear voices? Footsteps? Snow crunching?" I shook my head. He looked out at the yard. The snowmen had been knocked apart by then. Just lumps of snow left behind. "Probably someone trying to scare your family," he said. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because he didn't say it like he believed it. That night, Dad slept downstairs on the couch. I heard him loading the old hunting rifle he kept in the closet. He told Mom it was just in case. She told him not to be dramatic. Then she cried in the bathroom with the fan on. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house made all its usual sounds. Pipes ticking, wind pushing at the siding, branches scraping faintly against the far side of the roof. Every few minutes, I sat up and looked out the window. The yard was empty. Just snow. Just trees. I must have fallen asleep sometime after 2. When I woke up, there were 4 snowmen. They stood in a crooked line across the backyard, closer than before. One near the tree line, one halfway through the yard, one by the old birdbath, one at the bottom of the porch steps. The closest one wore my dad's blue work glove. Not a glove like his actual glove. I knew because the index finger had silver duct tape wrapped around it. He had torn it fixing the snowblower and refused to throw it away. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just backed away from the window until my knees hit the bed. Then I heard my dad downstairs. "Lisa!" My mom shouted. "What?" "Where's my glove?" I ran down the stairs so fast I almost slipped. Dad was standing in the kitchen, staring out the glass door. The rifle was in his hand. Mom saw it and snapped, "Put that down." Dad didn't. The snowman at the porch steps had pebble eyes pointed upward, right at the kitchen window. My dad's glove was stuck on one of its branch hands like it was waving. There was something else around its neck. A gray wool scarf. Mom saw it and covered her mouth. "That's Mrs. Donnelly's," she whispered. Mrs. Donnelly lived alone at the end of our road. She made Christmas cookies every year and left plates of them on neighbors' porches. She had been reported missing the night before. Dad called the police again. This time, they didn't talk about neighborhood kids. They searched the trees. They brought dogs. They walked through snow up to their knees and disappeared into the woods for nearly an hour. I watched from my bedroom. One of the dogs refused to go past the pine line. It just stood there barking, pulling backwards so hard its handler almost fell. By late afternoon, half the town knew about our backyard. A police car stayed parked outside our house that evening. An officer told my parents not to let me out of their sight. My mom packed a bag and said we should go to my aunt's house until this was over. Dad agreed. That was when things got strange. Not scary strange. Impossible strange. My aunt lived 20 minutes away. We packed quickly. Clothes, chargers, medication, Christmas presents that hadn't been wrapped yet. My dad carried everything to the car while the police officer waited by the driveway. I remember standing in the foyer wearing my winter coat, looking back at the kitchen. The back door was locked. The curtains were closed. Still, I felt watched. Not imagined watched. Watched. We got into the car. Dad turned the key. The engine clicked. He tried again. Click. Again. Nothing. He cursed under his breath and popped the hood. The officer came over with a flashlight. They both looked inside. Dad checked the battery, the cables, the starter, things I didn't understand. Mom sat in the passenger seat, gripping her purse. I sat in the back with my backpack on my lap. Is someone doing this? I asked. Mom turned around. What? The car. No, she said. It's cold. Cars do this. But the police cruiser wouldn't start either. That was the moment I saw real fear on an adult's face for the first time. The officer tried his radio. Static. He stepped away from the cars and lifted it higher. Dispatch, this is Miller. Only static answered. My dad looked down the road. The streetlights flickered, then went out one by one. Not all at once. One, then another, then another. Like something was walking away from town and taking the light with it. Mom whispered, "Get inside." We did. Dad locked every door. The officer came in with us, trying his radio again and again. He kept telling everyone to stay calm, which made it worse. The power went out at 7:13 p.m. I know because I was staring at the microwave clock when it died. The whole house fell into darkness. Mom lit candles. Dad pulled blankets from the closet. The officer stood near the front window, phone pressed to his ear. No service. None of us said what we were thinking. We were trapped. On Christmas Eve, in a house surrounded by snowmen wearing clothes from people who had vanished. Around midnight, the sound started, soft at first. A faint crunch, then another, then another. Snow compressing under weight. Dad raised the rifle. The officer turned off his flashlight. We all stood in the dark kitchen listening. Crunch, 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 coming from the backyard. My mom pulled me against her. Her hand was over my mouth, though I hadn't made a sound. The footsteps stopped, right outside the back door. Nobody breathed. Then something tapped the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. Not hard, polite, like a neighbor asking to be let in. The officer moved first. Slow steps. Gun drawn. He reached for the curtain over the back door window. Dad whispered, "Don't." The officer ignored him. He lifted the curtain. Nothing was there. Just darkness and falling snow. Then my mom screamed. I turned. The kitchen window above the sink was fogged from the inside, and something had written on it, not with a finger. From the outside, letters scraped through frost. Ben. My name. My knees went weak. The officer grabbed my shoulder and pulled me away from the window. Dad shouted, "Who's there?" No answer. Then came the sound from upstairs. A slow creak. My bedroom floor. I knew that sound. That one loose board near my desk. I heard it every night when I walked to the window. Creak, creak, creak. Someone was in my room. My mom started sobbing. Dad went toward the stairs with the rifle raised. The officer told him to wait. Dad didn't listen. I followed before anyone could stop me. I don't know why. Maybe because it was my room. Maybe because some stupid part of me needed to see. Needed to prove there was a person behind this. A neighbor. A maniac. Someone breathing. Something human. Dad climbed the stairs first. The officer behind him. Me behind the officer. My mom whispering my name from below. The hallway was dark except for the flashlight beam shaking across the walls. My bedroom door was open. I had left it closed. Dad stopped outside it. The officer stepped in first. His flashlight swept over my bed, my desk, my posters, my closet. Empty. Then the beam landed on the window. It was wide open. Snow blew through the screenless frame, scattering across my carpet. My desk chair had been pushed under the window, and on the chair sat a small snowman. Not big, not even knee-high, just 3 little balls of snow stacked neatly. It had pebble eyes, tiny twig arms, and around its neck was my mother's gold necklace, the one she never took off. I heard her gasp from the doorway behind me. Her hand flew to her throat. The necklace was gone. None of us moved. The little snowman sat there on my chair, melting slowly onto the cushion. The officer approached it, gun pointed down now, breathing hard. He reached for the necklace. That was when the house shifted. Not shook. Shifted. A deep, groaning movement passed through the walls. The floor tilted just enough that I grabbed the door frame. A picture frame in the hallway slid off its nail and shattered. My mom screamed again. Dad yelled, "Earthquake?" But it wasn't an earthquake. There was no rumble from below. No vibration. It felt like the whole house had been picked up and set down wrong. Then, from outside, came a sound I will never forget. Not footsteps. Not tapping. A long, low scraping, wood dragging over frozen ground. The officer ran to the bedroom window and looked out. His flashlight beam cut across the yard. He froze. Dad shoved beside him. I squeezed between them and looked too. At first, I thought the snowmen had moved closer again. There were dozens of them now. Dozens. Spread across the backyard in rows. Some small. Some tall. Some leaning. All facing the house. Every single one wore something. A hat. A scarf. A glove. A jacket. A strip of fabric tied like a ribbon. I recognized some of them. So did my dad. I knew because he made a sound I had never heard from him before. A small broken sound. The snowmen stood perfectly still. The house groaned again. The floor tipped. My desk slid an inch toward the window. And then I understood the twist before any adult did. The snowmen weren't coming closer. We were moving toward them. "No," I whispered. Dad looked down at me. "What?" I couldn't take my eyes off the yard. "The house," I said. "The house is moving." He shook his head immediately. "That's not possible." But the scraping came again. Longer this time. The trees seemed closer than they had that morning. The porch was no longer where it should have been. The backyard looked shorter. The bird bath, which had always been halfway across the lawn, was now almost beneath my window. The house groaned, dragged, settled, dragged again. The officer backed away from the window. Everybody downstairs. Now. But the stairs had changed. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something from a dream. But when we ran into the hallway, the stairs were steeper than before. Narrower. The landing looked stretched, like the house was pulling itself out of shape. My mom was crying at the bottom. "Ben!" I started down. The house lurched. My foot slipped. Dad grabbed my coat and yanked me back so hard the zipper dug into my throat. A window shattered somewhere below. Cold air rushed through the house. Then came voices. Not loud. Not clear. Muffled voices from outside. Like people talking through walls of snow. My mom stopped crying. Everyone stopped. A voice whispered from the backyard. "Lisa." My mother's name. Then another voice. "Tom." My dad. Then, softest of all, closest of all, almost against my open bedroom window. "Ben." I don't remember deciding to run. I only remember Dad grabbing Mom, the officer pushing us toward the front door, all of us slipping in the dark, furniture crooked now, candles fallen and snuffed out. The front door wouldn't open. Dad pulled. The officer kicked. Nothing. It was like the outside had pressed itself against it. Then Mom pointed to the basement door. "Our old storm exit," she said. Dad stared at her. The storm exit was a rusted bulkhead door outside the basement. We never used it because it stuck in the winter, but it was still there. We ran down. The basement smelled like dust and cold concrete. The officer's flashlight flickered. Pipes groaned overhead. The whole house made sounds like an animal breathing through broken teeth. Dad found the bulkhead steps. He shoved his shoulder against the metal door. It didn't move. Again. Nothing. The officer helped. Together they pushed. The metal screamed, "Open an inch." Snow poured in. Dad yelled, "Again." They slammed into it. The opening widened. Cold air hit us. I crawled first because I was smallest. The snow outside came up to my chest. I clawed through it, gasping, my gloves filling with ice. Mom came after me. Then Dad. The officer was last. He was halfway out when something grabbed him. I didn't see what. I only saw his expression change. Surprise first. Then terror. He dropped the flashlight. Dad grabbed his arms and pulled. Mom screamed. I grabbed Dad's jacket and pulled too, uselessly, crying so hard I could barely see. For 1 second, the officer came forward. Then he was yanked back into the basement. The metal door slammed shut. Silence. No scream. No struggle. Just silence. Dad didn't wait. He grabbed me with one hand and Mom with the other, and we ran. Not toward the road. The road was gone. Where our driveway should have been, there was only white field. No mailbox. No street. No neighbor houses. Just snow stretching in every direction and the dark pine trees behind us, closer than ever. My mom kept saying, "Where's the road? Where's the road?" Dad didn't answer. We ran until my lungs burned. Behind us, the house groaned again. I looked back once. I wish I hadn't. Our house sat in the middle of the backyard, farther from the street than it had ever been, angled wrong, its windows glowing faintly with candlelight we had left behind. And the snowmen were around it now. Not in rows. In a circle. Facing inward. Watching the house. Watching us. We reached the main road almost an hour later. I still don't understand how. A truck driver found us walking barefoot through snow because Mom had lost her boots somewhere and Dad's hands were bleeding from the cold. The driver called police from a gas station 2 towns over. By morning, emergency crews went back. They found our house exactly where it had always been. At least, that's what the report said. No drag marks. No broken foundation. No moved porch. No snowman. No officer. His cruiser was still in the driveway, engine dead, radio working perfectly. The official explanation was stress, weather, and some kind of carbon monoxide exposure, even though every test came back clean. The missing people stayed missing. The clothing was never explained. My parents stopped talking about that night after a while. Not because they forgot, because remembering changed them. My dad sold the house that spring. We moved 3 states away. For years, I convinced myself parts of it couldn't have happened. Memory is fragile, especially childhood memory. Fear exaggerates things. Snowstorms confuse distances. Darkness plays tricks. That's what I told myself. I'm 31 now. I live in an apartment building in a city where it barely snows. I don't decorate for Christmas. I don't watch holiday movies. I don't like white lights in windows. Last week, we had a freak winter storm. Nothing major. Just a few inches. Enough to cover the cars. Enough to make the alley behind my building quiet. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm because my bedroom felt too bright. I already knew before I looked. There was a snowman in the alley. Small. Crooked. Facing my window. It wore a blue work glove with silver duct tape around the index finger. My father died 8 years ago. We buried him with both hands covered. I called my mother before I called the police. She didn't say hello. She just breathed into the phone for a moment and whispered, "Ben, don't go near the window." Then the line went dead, and from somewhere inside my apartment walls, I heard the slow, heavy sound of wood dragging across snow. Story 6. I used to love Christmas Eve. That probably sounds strange coming from an old man who spent the last 12 of them alone, eating reheated soup in front of a television that mostly played for the noise. But I did love it once. I loved the smell of pine in the living room. I loved the way frost gathered on the windows. I loved hearing people laugh in the kitchen, while someone always burned the rolls and blamed the oven. My wife, Elise, used to say I turned softer in December. She was right, or maybe I just pretended to. By the time this happened, I was 74, living alone in the same small house in northern Vermont where Elise and I had raised our son. The house sat at the end of a narrow road that the county always plowed last, which meant by Christmas Eve it usually felt like the rest of the world had forgotten I existed. My son, Matthew, lived in Oregon with his wife and 2 children. We talked on holidays, sometimes birthdays, and on the occasional Sunday when he remembered I wasn't dead yet. That sounds bitter. I suppose I was. The truth is, I had earned some of that loneliness. I had not been an easy husband. I had not been a warm father. I had spent most of my life chasing work, pride, and the kind of silence men call peace when what they really mean is control. By the time I understood that, Elise was already gone, Matthew had learned to stop needing me, and my house had become a museum of things I should have cared about while they were still alive around me. That Christmas Eve started like any other lonely holiday. I made coffee too late in the afternoon. I told myself I would cook a proper dinner, then opened a can of green beans and left them sitting on the counter. I had bought a small ham from the grocery store 2 days earlier because the cashier, a girl with glittery nails and tired eyes, asked if I had big plans for Christmas. I said, family dinner. I don't know why I lied. Maybe because she smiled like she believed me. Around 5, the snow started falling harder. It wasn't a storm exactly, just one of those steady, quiet snows that makes the world look clean from a distance. I lit the fireplace, set 2 candles on the dining table out of habit, and pulled down the box of old ornaments from the hall closet. I don't usually decorate anymore. But that year, for some reason, I put up the little artificial tree Elise had bought after we got too old to drag real ones through the front door. It leaned slightly to the left, no matter how much I adjusted the stand. I hung 3 ornaments before I had to sit down. One was Matthew's from kindergarten. A paper star, laminated poorly, his name written in blue marker across the back. I held it longer than I meant to. Then I heard knocking. Not at the front door. At the kitchen window. It was soft at first. So soft I thought it was a branch tapping the glass. But there were no trees close enough to touch that side of the house. I turned off the television. The house went still. 3 taps came again. Light. Patient. Human. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the back of the chair, listening to the fire crackle behind me. I remember thinking how ridiculous it was to feel afraid. I was an old man in a locked house. Whoever was outside was probably a neighbor, or someone whose car had slid off the road. Then I saw her. A woman stood beyond the kitchen window, half hidden by the snow, one gloved hand lifted near the glass. She was not young, but she was not old either. Maybe 40, maybe 50. It was hard to tell through the frost. She wore a dark wool coat buttoned all the way to her throat and a red scarf wrapped around her head like women wore in old photographs. Snow clung to her shoulders. Her lips were pale. I hurried to the back door and opened it. The cold came in like a living thing. "Good Lord," I said. "Are you all right?" She stood on the back step, arms held close to her body. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was calm, almost embarrassed. "I saw your light." I looked past her into the yard. Snow had covered the path from the road. The gate at the far end stood open, swinging gently. "Were you in an accident?" "No." "Are you lost?" She looked at me for a second too long. Then she smiled. "A little." That was the first thing that bothered me, though I didn't know why at the time. Not the smile. The way she said it, like she was answering a different question than the one I had asked. I stepped aside. "Come in before you freeze." She hesitated at the threshold. Her eyes moved over my face, then passed me into the kitchen. For a moment, she looked almost sad. Then she entered. The kitchen smelled of coffee, smoke, and the ham I had finally put in the oven. She removed her gloves carefully, finger by finger, and placed them on the counter. Her hands were thin, but not delicate. Working hands. There was a small silver ring on her right hand, plain and scratched. "You can warm yourself by the fire," I said. "I'll call someone. Police, maybe. Tow truck, if you need one." "No phone," she said quickly. I paused. She lowered her gaze. "I mean, there's no need. I only need to sit for a while. If that's all right." I should have insisted. Any sensible person would have. Instead, I looked at this freezing woman standing in my kitchen on Christmas Eve, and I felt ashamed of how quickly suspicion had risen in me. Elise would have already put a blanket around her shoulders. Elise would have made tea. Elise would have scolded me with one look. So I nodded. Of course. She followed me into the living room. The firelight touched her face, and that was when I noticed something I still have trouble explaining. She looked familiar. Not in the way strangers sometimes resemble people you used to know. It was more specific than that. Something in the angle of her mouth. The way she watched a room before stepping fully into it. The way she held herself, straight-backed, careful. Like she had learned young not to take up too much space. I offered her Elise's old quilt from the armchair. She touched the fabric with both hands. "You kept it," she said. I frowned. "What?" She blinked, then gave a small laugh. "I only meant it looks old. Handmade. My wife made it." "I know." The words came out so naturally that I almost missed them. Almost. She looked at me, and for the first time since she entered the house, something like fear passed over her face. "I'm sorry," she said. "I meant I could tell. It has that look." I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to ask why she had said it like that. But old men are cowards in strange ways. We avoid discomfort by pretending not to notice it. So I handed her the quilt and said nothing. "My name is Clara," she said. "Thomas," I answered. "I know." This time, she did not correct herself. The fire popped loudly. I felt the hairs rise along the back of my neck. She stared into the flames, wrapped in my dead wife's quilt, her wet shoes resting neatly on the rug. I told myself she must have seen my name somewhere. Mailbox, maybe. A package on the porch. Something ordinary. But my mailbox was at the road, and she had come to the kitchen window. I cleared my throat. "Do you live nearby?" "Not anymore." "But you did." "A long time ago." I waited for more, but she said nothing. The oven timer beeped in the kitchen, sharp and sudden. I nearly jumped. She turned toward the sound. "You always hated that noise," she said softly. I stared at her. "What did you say?" She looked back at the fire. "I said it's a terrible noise." No, she hadn't. I knew what I heard. Still, I went to the kitchen. My hands shook as I took the ham from the oven. I remember standing there with the oven mitts on, staring at the meat like it might explain what was happening. Behind me, the woman hummed. A Christmas song. Not one from the radio. One my mother used to sing under her breath when she needed bread. "Sleep now, little sparrow. Morning comes slow." I had not heard that song in 60 years. The carving knife slipped in my hand and struck the roasting pan with a metallic clang. The humming stopped. "Everything all right?" Clara called. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded too loud. I almost left then. I almost walked straight out the front door, got in my truck, and drove to town. But the road was buried, the woman was in my living room, and some stubborn, stupid part of me refused to be frightened in my own house. So I set the table for two. Ham, green beans, potatoes from a box, dinner rolls I warmed too long and burned on the bottom. When Clara sat across from me, the dining room looked different. Not warmer exactly, older. The candles flickered between us, their light softening the wallpaper Elise had always hated. Outside, snow pressed against the windows. The rest of the world disappeared. For a while, we ate like normal people. She thanked me after every dish. She cut her food into small, careful pieces. She asked about the house, and I told her things I don't usually tell anyone. How Elise painted the dining room yellow because she said winter was long enough. How Matthew used to hide peas in his napkin. How the basement flooded every spring until I finally fixed the drainage the year after everyone stopped caring. Clara listened closely. Too closely. Like she was not learning these things. Like she was remembering them. "Do you have children?" I asked. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. No. I have a son. I know. The room seemed to shrink. She set the fork down. You told me. No, I didn't. Yes, she said gently. You did. Just now. I looked at the candles. The flames were lower than they had been a minute before. Not blown out. Not flickering from a draft. Just shorter, as if the wax had melted too fast. Clara smiled. The flames dipped again. My mouth went dry. Who are you? She folded her hands in her lap. A guest. How do you know my name? You told me that too. Stop saying that. The words came out sharper than I intended. She did not flinch. That scared me more. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind moved softly against the windows. Somewhere in the house, an old pipe ticked in the wall. Then she said, When you were 9, you stole $2 from your mother's blue purse. I stopped breathing. You hid it under the loose floorboard in your bedroom because you wanted to buy a pocket knife from Mr. Hanley's shop. My chair creaked under me. When she asked, you blamed your brother. I pushed back from the table. Enough. Your brother cried because your father believed you. Enough. And when you finally confessed, your mother said she already knew. She said she was waiting to see whether you would become the kind of man who chose truth after fear. My hands were gripping the table edge. I could feel my heartbeat in my thumbs. Nobody knew that. Nobody. My brother died before Elise ever met him. My parents were long gone. I had never told Matthew because it was small and ugly in mine. Clara watched me with those familiar eyes. How do you know that? She looked down at her plate. Because I remember the floorboard. I stood so fast my chair fell backward. The sound cracked through the room. Clara did not move. The candle flames bowed low, almost flat, then rose again. I backed toward the kitchen. I want you to leave. Her face changed then. Not anger. Not sadness. Disappointment. It was the expression Elise used to give me when I had said something cruel and thought volume could make it right. I can't leave yet, Clara said. Yes, you can. No. I reached for the wall phone, the old landline I kept because cell service was unreliable in storms. I lifted the receiver. Dead. No dial tone. Just a faint static hiss. Then beneath it, very faintly, I heard my mother's song. Sleep now, little sparrow. I dropped the receiver. Clara stood. The candles sank lower. Sit down, Thomas. Her voice was still soft. That made it worse. I moved toward the front door instead. My joints ached, my slippers slid on the hallway rug, and I hated how old I suddenly felt. I grabbed the deadbolt and twisted. It would not turn. I tried again. Nothing. The lock was frozen in place. Behind me, Clara's footsteps entered the hall. Slow. Measured. Not chasing. That was the terrible part. She knew I had nowhere to go. I turned around, pressing my back against the door. She stood under the hallway light, wrapped in Elise's quilt, snow still melting in her hair though she had been inside nearly an hour. You should not have opened the door, she said. My stomach dropped. Why? Because now you have to remember. I don't want to remember anything. That has always been the problem. I looked toward the kitchen window, thinking I could break it if I had to. Thinking like a frightened animal. Thinking like a man who had spent his life too proud to apologize and was now looking for exits in his own home. Clara followed my gaze. You can try, she said. I did. I'm ashamed to admit how quickly I panicked. I grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace and went to the kitchen. Clara did not stop me. She only watched from the doorway as I swung at the window over the sink. The poker hit the glass and bounced back hard enough to sting my wrists. Not a crack. Not even a mark. I swung again. And again. My breath came in short bursts. My shoulder burned. The kitchen filled with the dull, useless sound of metal striking glass that would not break. Finally I stopped. Outside the window, beyond my reflection, I saw footprints in the snow. Dozens of them, all leading toward the house. None leading away. I turned slowly. Clara stood closer than before. I had not heard her move. Please, I said. It came out smaller than I meant it to. Her expression softened. I'm not here to hurt you. Then what do you want? She looked toward the dining room. To finish dinner. I laughed once. A dry, broken sound. You're insane. No, she said. You are lonely. There is a difference. That struck me harder than it should have. She returned to the table. I don't know why I followed. Maybe because fear had emptied me out. Maybe because the house was locked and the windows would not break and the phone was singing with my mother's voice. Or maybe because some part of me already understood that Clara was not there for my body. She was there for something worse. I sat across from her. The candles were half their size now, though they had been new when I lit them. Clara picked up her glass of water. Do you remember Christmas of 1971? I closed my eyes. No. Yes, you do. I shook my head. But I did. I was 19 that year. Home from college. My mother sick with something she kept calling a chest cold because the real word scared her. My father had already died, my brother was buried, and the house felt too small for all the grief in it. There had been a girl from town, Anna Reed. She was kind, too kind for me. She had asked me to come with her family after Christmas, to help at her uncle's farm for the winter. Fresh air, honest work, space to think. I remember laughing at that. I remember telling her I was not made for mud and cows and small lives. That same night, my mother asked me to stay home for one semester. Just one. She needed help. I told her I couldn't. I had plans. I had scholarships. I had a future. She said, of course. I left 2 days later. She died in February. I did not make it back in time. Clara watched me remember. You made a choice, she said. Everyone makes choices. Yes. Her eyes glistened in the candlelight. But some choices keep making you. I stared at her face. And suddenly I saw it. Not clearly. Not like a photograph. More like a shape beneath water. The line of her nose was my mother's. The set of her jaw was my father's. Her eyes were Matthew's when he was little and still looked at me like I could fix anything. Her hands, folded on the table, were mine. Older. Softer. Unruined. My throat tightened. What are you? She smiled again. The candles burned lower. I'm what was left at the door. I shook my head. I don't understand. Yes, you do. No, you do. The room darkened by inches. She leaned forward. If you had stayed that winter, Thomas, you would have buried your mother with clean hands. You would have married Anna Reed. You would have raised children who did not fear your silence. You would have learned that work is not love, and pride is not shelter, and a house is not a home just because your name is on the deed. I could not speak. You would have become someone else. The flames trembled between us. Someone like me. I looked at her red scarf, the silver ring, the calm, watchful eyes. A laugh rose in my chest and broke apart before it reached my mouth. That's not possible. I know. People don't split in two because of one decision. No, she said. They split in smaller ways. Over years. Quietly. One apology swallowed. One phone call ignored. One hand not held. One door closed because it was easier than opening it. I pressed my palms against my eyes. Stop. But she kept talking. Not cruelly. That was the unbearable part. She told me about Matthew's 10th birthday, the one I missed because a client dinner ran late. I remembered coming home with an expensive model airplane and finding him asleep on the couch, cake dried on his shirt. I remembered Elise whispering, "He waited for you." I remembered saying, "I'm tired." She told me about Elise crying in the pantry, where she thought I couldn't hear her. She told me about the last voicemail Matthew left before he stopped trying so hard. "Dad, it's me. Just calling. No big deal." I had listened to it in my truck outside a hardware store and told myself I'd call him back later. Later became years. The candles were almost gone. The dining room filled with smoke, though nothing burned. I was crying by then, quietly like old men cry when they do not want even ghosts to see it. My chest hurt, not like a heart attack. Worse, like something inside me had been locked for decades and had finally started pounding on the door. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. Clara's face was wet too. "Because tonight is the last night you can choose anything." I looked up. "What does that mean?" She did not answer immediately. The fire in the living room collapsed into embers. Outside, the wind stopped. The silence became complete. Then Clara reached into the pocket of her coat and placed something on the table. A small paper star, laminated poorly. Matthew's name written across the back in blue marker. My blood went cold. I looked toward the Christmas tree. The ornament was gone. How did you get that? He made it for you, she said. I know. No, she said. You kept it. That is not the same thing. I reached for it, but she placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cold, not freezing, cold like window glass. You can call him, she said. The phone is dead. It won't be. I stared at her. And say what? The truth. I laughed bitterly. At 74? Yes. He won't care. You don't know that. He has his own life. Because you taught him to. That one landed clean. I pulled my hand away. For a moment, anger saved me from shame. You come into my house, eat my food, talk in riddles, drag up every mistake I've ever made, and now you think one phone call fixes it? No. Her voice sharpened for the first time. One phone call does not fix it. One apology does not erase it. One Christmas Eve does not make you good. The candles flickered violently. But it is still a choice. I looked at her across the table. And I hated her. Because she was right. Because she was impossible. Because she knew every locked room inside me and stood there with the keys. I stood again, slower this time, and walked to the phone. My legs felt weak. My hand shook as I lifted the receiver. For one awful second, there was only static. Then a dial tone. Real. Plain. Ordinary. I dialed Matthew's number from memory, though I had not used it in months. It rang 4 times. Then his voice answered, cautious and tired. Dad. I could not speak. Dad, is everything okay? I looked back toward the dining room. Clara stood in the doorway now. The candlelight behind her was almost gone. Matthew, I said. My voice broke on his name. There was silence on the line. Then softer, yeah. I gripped the phone cord. I'm sorry. Nothing. The words felt childish. Pathetic. Too small for the weight they were meant to carry. So I kept going. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I made your mother lonely. I'm sorry I made you feel like loving me was work. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it while I still could. The line stayed quiet so long I thought he had hung up. Then I heard him breathing. Dad, he said, and his voice sounded younger than I had heard it in years. Are you sick? I looked at Clara. She nodded once. I don't know, I said honestly. Do you need me to call someone? No. No, I swallowed. I wanted to hear your voice. Another long silence. Then Matthew said, okay. That was all. But he didn't hang up. We stayed like that for several minutes. Not talking much. Just breathing through the years between us. He told me the children were asleep. His wife was wrapping gifts. It was raining in Oregon. I told him it was snowing here. I almost told him about Clara, but when I looked toward the dining room again, she was gone. The quilt lay folded over the chair. The candles had burned down to 2 blackened stubs. Dad, Matthew said. Yes. Call me tomorrow. I closed my eyes. I will. When the call ended, the house felt different. Not safe. Not exactly. Just empty in a cleaner way. I walked through every room. Clara was nowhere. Her gloves were gone from the counter. Her wet footprints had vanished from the rug. The back door was locked. I told myself I had fallen asleep. That grief and age had finally turned on me. That I had dreamed the whole thing after drinking too much coffee and staring too long at old ornaments. Then I saw the kitchen window. On the outside of the glass, written in the frost, were 4 words. Not yet, little sparrow. I did not sleep that night. In the morning, the road was plowed. The phone worked. Matthew called just after breakfast, awkward but real, and I answered before the second ring. I never told him the whole story. What would I say? That a woman came out of the snow and wore my dead wife's quilt? That she knew the shape of my sins? That she claimed to be the life I had abandoned? No. People forgive old men many things, but not madness. It has been 3 years since that Christmas Eve. Matthew calls every Sunday now. Sometimes the children get on the phone and tell me stories I can barely follow. I visited them last summer. It was uncomfortable at first, then less so. I am not fixed. That is important to say. I did not become kind overnight. I did not wake up free of regret. Some mornings I still reach for bitterness because it is familiar and warm in the hand. But I try. I answer calls. I say things before funerals. I leave doors open. Every Christmas Eve, I set the table for two. I tell myself it is only a habit now. A strange one maybe, but harmless. Last night, the snow started falling again. Hard, steady, quiet. I had just lit the candles when I heard 3 soft taps at the kitchen window. I stood very still. Across the room, the telephone began to ring. The caller ID showed my own name. And outside, beyond the frost-covered glass, someone was standing in the snow, wearing a red scarf and smiling like they had finally found their way home.